Welcome to another quiet journey into the past. Tonight we're stepping back to the soot-darkened streets and echoing stone corridors of Victorian Britain, into a place built not for comfort, but for control, the Workhouse. This won't be a story of Parliament or the grand halls of power, not tonight. Instead, it's slower, softer, a different kind of history, one that lingers on cold mornings, meagre meals, and the quiet endurance of those who had nowhere else to go. We'll follow the shiver of waking in a bare, unheated dormitory, the clatter of tin bowls at breakfast, the ache of laundry work that never ends, and the whispered moments when families, divided by rules, catch a glimpse of one another across the yard. Every segment in this video is designed to be slow, immersive, and calming. You don't need to stay awake, just let your mind drift through these echoing halls, past the smell of damp stone and boiled cabbage, and into the faded lives that once moved within these walls. And if you find yourself enjoying this slower, sleepier history, you can quietly like this video, or leave a comment if you're still awake at the end. And if you'd like more journeys like this, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps keep these quiet stories alive, and we'd be glad to have you back. Now, take a slow breath, get comfortable, and let's begin with a simple question. What was it really like to enter and endure life in the workhouse? The workhouse doors were never grand. They were plain, heavy, often painted in dull colours, grey, black or brown, meant to last through years of rain and soot. As you stand before them, the street behind feels strangely quiet. It's not the silence of peace, but the hush of people who don't want to linger here. Neighbours pass by quickly. They don't meet your eyes. Everyone knows that to enter these doors is to carry the mark of poverty, and that mark is hard to wash away. You push the door open and step inside. The air is cooler here, cool not from freshness, but from stone walls that never quite lose the damp. A faint smell of soap, coal smoke, and something boiled, cabbage perhaps, hangs in the still air. The entrance hall is not welcoming. There are no carpets, no decorations, only bare boards beneath your feet, worn smooth by thousands of steps before yours. A narrow desk stands to one side, where a clerk looks up from his ledger. He asks your name, your age, and if you have any family with you. His voice is not unkind, but it is practiced, efficient, as if he has asked these questions 1,000 times before. If you are alone, you'll be taken to the men's or women's ward. If you've come with your family, this is where the separation begins. Husbands are sent one way, wives another, children yet another. The rules are strict, too strict for protest. You may see them again only at appointed times, and sometimes not for weeks. Your clothing is noted down, each item, even the worn shoes on your feet, and soon taken away to be washed or replaced. In their place, you are given the rough, standard workhouse uniform, plain, ill-fitting, and designed to strip away individuality. It is not meant for comfort. It is meant for order. Your few belongings, if you have any, are stored away until you leave. The room where this is done smells of old cloth and dust, the shelves lined with bundles belonging to people whose names you will never know. There is a sense from the very first step that the workhouse is not just a building. It is a system, a machine that takes people in, reduces them to rules and records, and places them where they are needed, not where they wish to be. And as you are led down the echoing corridor toward your assigned ward, you can hear faint sounds in the distance. The scrape of boots on stone, the clang of a pail, the low hum of voices. Each one part of this enclosed world you are now part of. It is the first day of many, or so you hope it will not be. Segment 2, the morning routine. The day begins not with sunlight, but with the sharp, metallic toll of the workhouse bell. It is not a gentle sound, it is insistent, brassy, and it carries through every corridor, every ward, every sleeping space. It does not matter if you are awake already or deep in sleep. The sound demands that you rise. The air in the dormitory is heavy and cold. It smells faintly of damp wool and the lingering scent of boiled porridge from the night before. The walls are plain, whitewashed but yellowed in places from age, and the windows are set high, allowing only the thinnest stripe of grey dawn to enter. If it is winter, that stripe is so dim it is barely there at all. Around you, the others stir in silence. A cough here, the scrape of a bed leg against the floor there. The narrow beds are so close together that as people swing their legs over the sides, knees nearly touch. The mattresses are thin, the stuffing shifting under your weight. The single blanket you slept under feels suddenly insufficient the moment you leave its small pocket of warmth. Attendants walk briskly between the rows, calling out instructions, their boots clicking against the floorboards. The message is always the same. Up, fold your blanket, make your bed, dress quickly. No idle talk, no dawdling. The workhouse uniform awaits. A coarse woolen tunic for men, long skirts and aprons for women, simple caps for all. The fabric is stiff and scratchy, smelling faintly of lye soap from the laundry. If you came in with clothes of your own, they were taken from you upon arrival, washed, stored, and perhaps given back when you leave, if you ever do. A second ringing of the bell sends you into the corridor. The group moves as one, boots and bare feet shuffling along the worn stone. The hall is long and narrow, lit by a few oil lamps that cast a faint yellow glow. The smell of the kitchen grows stronger as you approach the dining hall, a mix of steam, oats and bread. Breakfast is served in large tin bowls, porridge, pale and thin, with an occasional lump that makes it slightly more substantial. Sometimes there is bread, cut into uneven hunks. The bread is dense, dark and dry, and it must be dipped into the porridge to be eaten comfortably. Everyone sits on long wooden benches, worn smooth by years of use. There is little conversation. Some workhouses insisted on silence during meals, others simply discouraged talking. The clink of spoons against tin bowls becomes the dominant sound, interrupted now and then by the soft scrape of a bench against the floor as someone shifts in their seat. Once the bowls are empty, the utensils are collected, and the room empties quickly. There is no lingering, no rest after eating. Instead, everyone files into the yard for muster. The muster is formal, names are read from a ledger, faces are checked. Anyone missing is noted, sick in the infirmary, or rarely gone without leave. The sick may be spared work, but the infirmary is not a place of comfort. It smells of carbolic and stale air, and space there is limited. When the roll is finished, the division begins. Men are sent to one set of tasks: stone breaking, carpentry, heavy labour, women to others, laundry, kitchen work, sewing, cleaning. Children have their own assignments, often the lighter jobs, but still relentless in pace. By the time the final instructions are given, the early light has shifted from grey to pale gold, the gates to the work areas open, the day's labour begins, stretching ahead like an unbroken road, and tomorrow it will begin the same way again, down to the clang of the bell, the scratch of the uniform, and the taste of thin porridge in a cold hall. Segment 3. The Laundry Hall. The laundry is not merely a room in the workhouse, it is its own world, a heavy, steaming, unending world. You feel it before you see it. The moment you approach the thick wooden doors, the air begins to change, warmer, damp, laden with the mingled scents of lye soap, hot water, and the faint sourness of old cloth steeped too long in sweat before being scrubbed. The floor beneath your boots turns slicker here, polished not by care, but by 1,000 wet footsteps. Push open the door, and the sound strikes you first. It's a low, steady thunder of industry, layer upon layer of small noises stitched together into one great hum, the slap of wet fabric against wood, the churn of heavy water in stone sinks, the groan of the mangle, 2 great rollers chewing slowly through sheets to press the last drops from them, the hiss of kettles emptying scalding water into waiting tubs, and over it all, the constant murmur of voices, low, tired, unhurried. The sound of women talking just enough to keep themselves from falling silent entirely. The room itself is long, high-ceilinged, and choked with steam. Windows line the upper walls, cracked open even in the biting cold of winter. On damp days, the fog inside is so thick that the far end of the hall disappears, the workers there reduced to vague shapes moving through a misty haze. Down the centre, great stone sinks are set into the floor. Some are half filled with cloudy grey water, others steaming with the fresh heat of water hauled from the kitchen boilers. Wooden washboards lean inside them, their ridges worn smooth in places by years of relentless scrubbing. Soap sits in thick pale bars, softening at the edges from constant handling, and a gritty residue clings to the rims of the sinks. The workers, mostly women but not all, stand with their sleeves rolled to the shoulder, forearms raw and flushed from the heat. Their aprons are stiff with old soap, damp patches darkening the coarse fabric. The smell of lye clings to them so deeply it has become part of their skin. They lean over their tubs, gripping shirts and trousers and sheets, scrubbing until the cloth froths white, then plunging it into cold water with a wet slap that sends drops up into their faces. New arrivals to the workhouse often start here. The hardest, dullest jobs are theirs, hauling sodden baskets of laundry so heavy it takes 2 people to move them. Their backs ache, their hands crack and sting, and before long, the skin beneath their nails turns raw from the mix of soap and water. For them, the hours stretch on like weeks. The hierarchy of the laundry is unwritten but known. Older hands work the mangle, a dangerous contraption of turning rollers and iron cranks where you must keep your fingers well clear or risk losing them. Others tend the drying racks, tall wooden frames where sheets, shirts and uniforms are clipped in place and left to drip onto the flagstones below. The youngest or weakest scrub the stubborn stains, bent over smaller tubs, their bodies hunched and tight against the cold splashes that strike them when they beat the fabric clean. In one corner, a small fire burns in a brick hearth. Over it, irons are kept hot, not the smooth, shiny ones you may picture, but heavy blocks of metal with handles wrapped in worn cloth. When the laundry is dry enough, the ironers press uniforms until the creases are sharp and unyielding. The smell here is different, sharper, tinged with the faint scorch of linen heated a fraction too long. Every part of the laundry is physical. You feel it in your shoulders as you work, in the constant pull of your lower back, in the ache that settles into your wrists and fingers. The hours are marked not by clocks, but by the gradual shift of light through the high windows and the building weight of exhaustion. Morning merges into afternoon without any true pause, only the brief relief of the midday bell when the workers step away from the tubs and sink onto benches, hands still damp and smelling of soap. And when the day ends, the work is never truly finished. For every load washed, rinsed, wrung, dried and folded, another waits in the yard, baskets of clothing, bedding and towels that will greet the workers in the grey light of morning. The laundry does not rest, and neither for long can you. Segment 4. The Workhouse Kitchen. The kitchen is the warmest room in the entire workhouse, and yet it is not a comfort. From the outside you hear it before you step in, a dense, echoing mixture of clattering tin, the heavy thud of ladles against pot rims, the hiss of boiling water spitting onto hot iron, and the dull rhythmic chop of knives working their way through piles of vegetables. Somewhere beneath all that is a deep, steady hum, ventilation pipes rattling, the low rumble of a fire that never goes out. Open the thick door and the heat hits you like a wall. It's not a gentle warmth, but the close, wet heat of boiling vats and roaring ovens. Your clothes cling almost instantly. The smell is layered, stock bubbling in great copper pans, bread just beginning to brown in deep ovens, and the sharper, earthy scent of turnips, onions and cabbages cut in bulk. There's a faint tang of coal smoke, too, threading through the air no matter how often the upper windows are propped open. The space itself is large and rectangular, with flagstone floors worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. Heavy wooden tables run the length of the room, their surfaces darkened and scarred by years of chopping, kneading and carving. The walls are hung with ladles, knives and dented tin measures, each one with its own assigned hook, each one replaced exactly when not in use. Order is not optional here. Against one wall, massive blackened ranges stand side by side, each with its own oven and a broad flat plate for boiling kettles. On the busiest days, all of them burn at once. Steam curls upward in pale threads from lids that never fully fit, dripping condensation back into the pots. A cook, her hair tied under a linen cap, sleeves rolled to the elbow, leans over one of the vats, stirring with a wooden paddle so long she needs both hands to manage it. You can hear the slow swish of the paddle slicing through thick soup, lifting carrots, swedes, and the occasional knucklebone to the surface before they sink again into the cloudy depths. Further along, a pair of boys, kitchen helpers barely into their teens, are bent over sacks of potatoes, scraping the skins away with quick, practiced movements. The pile of peeled ones grows slowly in a wooden tub, while another helper gathers the skins into a bucket for the pig feed. They don't speak much. Conversation here is saved for small bursts, often shouted over the clatter of pans or the whistle of a boiling kettle. In the far corner next to the bread ovens, another worker, older with a permanent dusting of flour on her apron, kneads dough on a wide floured board. The dough rises and falls under her hands like breathing. Beside her, loaves waiting to be baked are lined in neat rows, pale and soft now, but soon to be browned and hardened into the plain, heavy bread that will feed hundreds. The smell of yeast clings to this part of the room, warm and faintly sour, mixing with the sharper note of baking crust from loaves already in the ovens. The work here is relentless. Everything must be done on a vast scale, hundreds of meals prepared, cooked, and served each day. The quantities are staggering. Sacks of flour emptied in a single morning, barrels of salted meat hacked into manageable pieces, vegetables chopped until hands cramp. And yet the food remains plain, almost austere. Broth, bread, and sometimes meat, served without seasoning beyond salt. A bell rings somewhere beyond the kitchen and the pace changes. Ladles are dipped, vats emptied into tin pails, and baskets of bread stacked high. The kitchen's labour spills outward into the dining hall, where the food will be portioned in strict measures. By the time the workers return, the kitchen is quieter, but never still. Pots are already being scrubbed, surfaces wiped down, dough prepared for the next day's bread. The fire under the largest range never truly dies. Even late at night, when the workhouse sleeps, there is always a faint red glow under the blackened grates, ready to be fed, ready to burn again when morning comes. Because here in the kitchen, as in the laundry, the work does not stop. It simply waits for you to return. Segment 5, the dining hall. The dining hall is not a place for conversation. It is a place for order. From the moment you step inside, the sheer size of the room swallows you. It stretches long and narrow, with rows of plain wooden tables running the entire length, each flanked by equally plain benches. The ceiling arches just high enough to carry the echoes of movement, footsteps on bare boards, the scrape of benches sliding out, the occasional cough that seems to bounce from one end to the other, The air is cooler here than in the kitchen, but there is still a faint trace of warmth, and the scents drift in from the far side of the building. Broth, damp bread, and the faintly metallic tang of tin plates. High windows let in a washed, grey light, the kind that flattens every shadow and bleaches the colour from the room. No fires burn here. Heat is not considered a necessity. At the far end stands a raised platform with a long table, reserved for the workhouse officials. Their position is a silent reminder of the rules. They eat first, they eat better, and they watch everyone else while they do it. The rest of the room is divided with care. Men to one side, women to the other. Children together at their own tables under the eyes of the matron. Talking between groups is forbidden, even whispers are discouraged. The meals themselves arrive in strict order. Tin pails of steaming broth are carried in from the kitchen, the liquid sloshing against the sides as the servers walk the length of the hall. Loaves of dense bread follow, stacked high in baskets, the crusts hard enough to resist a careless bite. At each table the same routine unfolds. A ladle of soup, a measured portion of bread, and nothing more. Seconds are not permitted. Every serving is watched, counted, and recorded. The sound of eating in the dining hall is not what you might expect. There is no chatter, no hum of conversation, only the small, repetitive noises of spoons dipping, scraping against tin, and the occasional rustle of clothing as someone shifts on a bench. Somewhere a child drops a crust of bread, and the sound is loud enough to turn a few heads. The matron sees it too. The crust is retrieved, brushed off, and handed back. Nothing is wasted here. For many, this is the quietest part of the day, but not in a comforting way. Meals are quick, functional, and silent, designed to feed, not to satisfy. The broth is thin, more water than meat, the vegetables boiled to softness until their flavours blur together. The bread is heavy in the stomach, meant to last until the next ration. There is no seasoning beyond salt, no variation beyond what the stores can offer. When the meal is finished, there is no lingering. Benches scrape again, and the line to return plates and bowls forms quickly. Tinware clinks in large tubs, ready to be scrubbed for the next sitting. Tables are wiped with damp cloths, benches pushed neatly back in place, and the room empties just as quickly as it filled. But the echo remains. Long after the last footsteps fade, the dining hall feels as though it's still holding its breath, waiting for the next bell, the next wave of bodies, the next measured meal. It is a room built for routine, and the routine never changes. In here, time is counted not in hours, but in servings. Segment 6. The dormitories. The dormitories are not designed for rest. They are designed for efficiency. The stairs up are narrow and steep, the boards creaking under the slow, regulated shuffle of tired feet. The air changes as you climb, cooler but carrying the faint smell of damp wool, unwashed linen, and the ghost of last night's breath. At the top, the hallways stretch in both directions, lit only by small windows and the weak yellow glow of oil lamps fixed to the walls. The dormitory doors are not heavy, but they always seem to groan on their hinges. Inside, the rooms are long, low, and tightly packed with iron-framed beds. Each bed has the same thin mattress, a single grey blanket, and a flat pillow that offers more shape than comfort. The frames are painted black, but the paint is chipped in places, revealing dull metal underneath. There are no curtains. Privacy is not part of the design. Men sleep in one wing, women in another. Children have their own quarters, smaller but just as tightly arranged. The beds are spaced close enough that if you turn in your sleep, you might hear your neighbour's breathing change. At night, the combined sound of dozens of sleepers becomes a kind of low, uneven tide, snores mingling with coughs, the occasional rustle of straw inside a mattress, or the sharp shift of someone rolling over. Each person has a small wooden box or trunk at the foot of their bed. This is the sum of their private space, the only place for what little they own, perhaps a change of clothes, a comb, or a folded scrap of paper with writing on it. The rest of the room belongs to the institution. The walls are bare, the floors are plain boards. Any personal touches are discouraged, sometimes even confiscated. In the cold months, the dormitory is a place of shivering bodies and curled spines. The windows are often draughty, and the single central stove, when lit, offers only a faint pocket of warmth that never quite reaches the far beds. People sleep in their clothes when the frost sets in, blankets pulled tight, breath hanging in pale clouds in the dim morning light. In summer, the air turns still and heavy. With so many bodies in close quarters, the room grows hot long before dawn. The smell of sweat and damp cloth lingers, and the air feels too thick to breathe deeply. The thin blankets are pushed aside, but rest still comes slowly. There are no clocks here. The rhythm of the dormitory is marked instead by the ringing of the morning bell. It comes early, always earlier than anyone wishes, and cuts through the half-silence with an iron clarity. The sound means the day has begun, and the bed you leave will be exactly as you found it when you return that night. No one lingers in the dormitories. Once you are up, you are expected to be moving. Beds are to be made tightly, boxes closed, floors swept. The room must look as though no one truly lives in it, only passes through it each night. And that, perhaps, is the truth of the dormitory. It is not a home, only a pause, a place where the day briefly ends, before it starts all over again. Segment 7. Morning roll. Call. It begins before the sun has truly claimed the sky. A muffled bell, a low, distant clanging, the kind that seems to come from everywhere at once when you're still half asleep. Then, footsteps, not hurried, but deliberate. The sound carries along the stone floors of the corridor, heels striking in a steady rhythm, each one a reminder that the day is here whether anyone is ready or not. Inside the dormitory, blankets are folded with stiff, practiced movements. The mattresses beneath them are thin, with an uneven sag in the middle from years of bodies lying in the same spot. Boots are pulled on, leather creaking faintly, laces drawn until they bite at the ankles. Some hands tremble slightly from the chill. Water from the shared basin splashes softly as faces are rinsed. The water is cold enough to make eyes widen and breath hitch. The towels are rough, leaving cheeks a little pink. No one speaks above a murmur. The hour is too early, and words cost more energy than they're worth right now. The hallway fills with the slow shuffle of people forming a line, men to one side, women to the other, children gathered at the back under the watchful gaze of a matron. The air smells faintly of soap, damp wool, and the faint, lingering ash from last night's fire. The roll call room itself is plain but imposing. Its floorboards are darkened by decades of boots wearing down the same patches. The walls are bare save for a single clock mounted high, its pendulum swinging like the calm, unbothered heartbeat of the building. The sound is steady, unchanging, and almost hypnotic. When the overseer enters, the change in atmosphere is almost invisible, yet everyone feels it. The scrape of his chair against the floor seems louder than it should. The ledger, thick and worn at the corners, is opened with deliberate care. The ink bottle is set neatly beside it. Names begin, one at a time, a slow march down the page. Here. Present. Sir. The replies are short, clipped, and clear. No one dares to be too quiet. A missed response means your name is repeated, slower this time, with the weight of expectation pressing down on you. The children can't help but shift from foot to foot, their shoes scuffing faintly against the boards. A cough echoes too sharply in the high-ceilinged room. Some adults stand perfectly still, not from discipline, but because it costs less energy to conserve the body's warmth in the morning chill. Sometimes there's a pause in the list, a name called, and no answer. The silence that follows seems to stretch. Perhaps the person is ill, perhaps late, or perhaps gone entirely. The overseer's pen scratches a slow note in the margin, and then the reading continues. At last, the final name is spoken. The ledger closes with a flat, heavy thud. The sound feels like a signal. Lines dissolve into movement. The assignments are given, some to the kitchens to prepare breakfast, others to sweep the corridors, carry coal, mend clothes, or begin the day's heavier labours. The children are shepherded toward the schoolroom, their smaller voices briefly brightening the air before fading down the hall. Older youths are dispatched to apprenticeships, trailing after their masters with quiet resignation. The roll call room empties until the echo of boots is replaced by the faint creak of settling wood. Outside, the pale morning light has grown a fraction stronger, stretching long, thin shadows across the yard. The day has officially begun, and it will be many hours before the next pause in the work. Segment 8. The kitchen before dawn. The kitchen is already awake. It has been for over an hour. Down a short flight of stone steps, the air changes, cool above, warmer below. The shift is subtle at first, then suddenly heavy, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke, boiling grain, and damp stone walls that have absorbed centuries of steam. The hearth dominates the far wall, wide enough for a grown man to step inside. A fire burns low in its belly, embers glowing like a cluster of small suns. The crackle is soft but constant, comforting in its repetition. Every few moments one of the cooks bends to add another log, sending a brief swirl of sparks into the dim air. The tables are scarred and burnished from decades of chopping, kneading, and scraping. A layer of fine flour dust clings to the grooves, catching the warm light. The sound of a knife's steady rhythm, chop, 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 blends with the dull thump of a wooden pestle, grinding herbs in a stone mortar. The scent rises, sharp and green, mixing with the heavier aroma of porridge thickening in its great copper pot. Steam ghosts upward from the pot, curling into the dim rafters before vanishing. A long-handled ladle stirs slowly, dragging through the mixture in a circle that never changes direction. The cook's arm moves without thought, guided by muscle memory rather than attention, her mind already on the bread that must be shaped next. In the corner, loaves are proving beneath linen cloths. The cloth rises and falls faintly with the dough's slow breath. A younger helper lifts the edge of one, peeking at the swelling shape beneath before tucking it back down as if disturbing it too much might offend it. Against one wall, a row of tin mugs waits in perfect alignment. The pewter is dull, but each bears a faint, clean scent from yesterday's scrubbing. Beyond them, baskets of apples and root vegetables sit in the cool shadows, waiting their turn to be peeled, sliced, or diced into the day's meals. The kitchen is not loud, but alive with quiet sounds. The whisk of a broom across the flagstones, the pop of sap in the fire, the distant clink of cutlery being counted in a side pantry. Someone coughs softly, clearing their throat before returning to the slow, deliberate business of work. Now and then a cook wipes her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a faint streak of flour across her temple. She doesn't notice. No one comments. In this room, such marks are badges of normalcy, like soot on the fingers or heat in the cheeks. From above, faint footsteps and voices drift down the stairwell. Soon the first of the morning workers will arrive for their portion, filling the benches and bowls with the thick porridge that is both fuel and habit. The cooks will ladle without hurry, moving like clock hands, steady, reliable, and precise. But for now it is still the cook's own hour. The fire glows, the steam drifts, the bread rises. And the day, though already begun, feels as if it is only stretching itself awake. Segment 9. The Apprentices' first chores. The courtyard still holds the chill of dawn, that damp, weighty cold that clings to the stones and lingers in the breath. A thin veil of mist softens the edges of the buildings, making the whole yard seem smaller, as though the day itself has not yet stretched awake. The apprentices arrive in twos and threes, boots scuffing against cobblestones worn smooth in the centre and sharp at the edges. They keep their cloaks pulled close, heads bent forward as if conserving whatever heat the night left them. A few yawn without shame, the rest keep their faces blank, saving their energy for the hours ahead. Some come burdened already, a bundle of broom handles balanced across the shoulder, a water bucket swinging from a rope handle, a leather apron folded neatly under one arm. Others arrive empty-handed, but with the wary posture of those expecting to be sent running at once. There is little talk. The quiet is filled instead with small, precise sounds. The creak of the workshop gates opening on their stiff hinges, the dull thump of a bucket set down, the hiss of feet sliding over damp stone. The first task is sweeping, always sweeping. The bristles drag over the stones in a slow, scraping rhythm, pushing away the layer of straw, grit, and yesterday's dust that has settled overnight. The cobblestones fight back in their own way, catching the broom in every small dip and uneven joint, demanding attention 1 inch at a time. At the yard's far edge, 2 older boys take turns at the pump. The handle groans on the downstroke, then sighs as it rises again. Each pull brings up a rush of icy water, splashing into the waiting bucket in a loud, sudden burst. Droplets leap into the air, catching the dim light before vanishing into the dirt. One boy shakes his hands briskly after each turn, water running off his fingers. The other simply rolls his sleeves higher, his forearms already blotched pink from the cold. Inside the carpentry room, a third boy uncovers the workbenches. He lays out planes, chisels, and mallets in exact rows, pausing now and then to wipe a thin film of sawdust from a blade. The air here smells different, wood dust, iron, and the faint sweetness of beeswax polish. He lifts a chisel, tests its edge with his thumb, and then carries it to the whetstone. The stone sings softly under the steel, each pass sending a fine curl of metal into the air. The youngest apprentice is set to gather wood shavings from yesterday's work. They are curled like pale ribbons, light enough to stick to his fingers, and they carry the warm, faintly resinous scent of pine. He works quickly, stuffing them into a burlap sack, some for the cook's fire, some for wrapping fragile goods. His small hands grow red from the cold, but he says nothing, intent on filling the bag before the master arrives. Even without the master's presence, his rules are everywhere, felt in the way brooms are returned to the same place each morning, in the unspoken understanding that no tool should be left out of order, in the apprentice's instinct to stand straighter when footsteps echo nearby. Above it all, a crow perches on the workshop roof, its head tilted, black eyes bright. It watches in stillness for a while, then lets out a single harsh caw, as if to announce its approval, or impatience, before flapping away into the mist. Bit by bit, the yard takes shape. The sweepings are piled neatly to one side, the buckets brimming with water, the benches laid out like soldiers on parade. The air feels clearer, sharper, as though the place itself is readying for the day. It is quiet work, almost invisible, and yet everything that follows, the noise, the trade, the bustle, depends on these unseen beginnings. The day's rhythm has been set, even if no one stops to notice. Segment 10. Market bells and the first shouts. The first bell comes not as a sudden clamour, but as a low, trembling note floating on the still cool air. It seems hesitant, as though it, too, is waking slowly, testing its voice before the day truly begins. That sound drifts down the narrow lanes, brushing over slate roofs, slipping around chimneys, seeping through the cracks in shutters still latched against the dawn. There is a pause, a breath. Then the second bell answers, clearer, brighter, a little more insistent. The tone carries differently now, bouncing from stone wall to timber beam, rolling down the street with a subtle command. These are not church bells, summoning souls toward prayer. They are market bells, calling the city's stomach and purse to life. In the workshop yard, the apprentices pause without meaning to, their broomstrokes slowing. A few tilt their heads toward the sound, eyes narrowing as if they could see the bell itself swinging far away. They picture the square beginning to stir, merchants rolling back stall cloths, hawkers setting down baskets still fragrant from the early morning bakehouse. But the pause lasts only a moment. The scrape of straw on stone resumes. Chores, after all, do not wait for bells. Somewhere beyond the gate, the city begins its quiet transformation. The market stalls unfold like a careful ritual, frames of worn oak lifted upright with a familiar practiced rhythm. Canvas awnings, stiff with cold, are shaken free of last night's damp and pulled into place, snapping lightly in the wind before being stretched taut and tied with knots that know their places. In the pale light, the colours look muted, weather-softened reds, faded greens, and strips of blue dyed years ago, patched in places with slightly different shades. The first voices are tentative, almost shy, a murmured greeting between two traders, a woman's voice lilting as she reminds her child to keep close to the cart, a baker's low hum as he lays his loaves out in neat rows. But bit by bit, like threads weaving into cloth, these sounds gather into something larger, the hum of trade before the rush. The smells follow soon after, a faint, sharp bite of raw onions from a wicker basket, the gentle warmth of bread fresh from the oven, its crust crackling faintly as the cold air touches it, the smoky sweetness of chestnuts roasting in a blackened pan over a small brazier, their shells splitting to reveal pale, mealy flesh. Somewhere, the iron tang of fresh fish rises from a stall, mingling with the salt scent of damp nets coiled beside it. A boy runs through the growing crowd with a tray of small pies, steam curling upward from their crimped edges. He slips between people without slowing, the pastries jostling but never toppling, his path marked by the warm, savoury trail they leave in the air. At another stall, a butcher works in silence, his heavy hands steady as he arranges cuts of meat in an ordered display. The pale marbling of fat catches the light. Beside them, a cleaver rests, the edge clean and bright. With each careful placement comes a soft, damp thud, a sound as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Then the bells sound again, closer now, above the square itself. The rhythm is quicker, almost playful, a bright cascade of notes signalling that the day's trading is about to begin in earnest. In the workshop yard, the apprentices feel the change even from here. The market's energy is spilling outward now, reaching them through the walls, a mixture of chatter, footsteps, and the metallic ring of coin on coin. One boy glances toward the gate as though expecting it to open at any moment. But for now, the yard still belongs to the morning. Damp air, muted light, and the scrape of broom bristles across stone. The world beyond the gate may be bursting into life, but here it is only just gathering its breath. Soon, soon, the gates will open, and the outside will come pouring in. Segment 11, the master arrives. The yard is still in that liminal state between quiet preparation and the rush of the working day. The apprentices have been sweeping for so long that the sound of bristles against stone has become like background music, soft, repetitive, easy to half ignore. Somewhere beyond the walls, the market's hum is beginning to swell, voices rising in loose, unformed calls, the clatter of wooden wheels over cobbles carrying faintly on the cold air. And then there is the click, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through everything else. A latch being lifted, a bolt drawn back. The kind of sound that every apprentice knows by heart. They don't even need to look toward it. Their bodies know what it means before their minds do. The sweeping slows. One boy draws the broom toward himself in a smaller, tighter arc. Another subtly straightens his back, shoulders pulling down and away from his ears, adopting the posture that says, "I have been working steadily for hours." Nobody speaks. The sound of the latch is followed by the muted hinge groan of a well-used door, one that has been oiled recently enough to move without protest, yet still has a trace of its age in its voice. And then he appears. At first only a shadow in the doorway, broad, still, framed by the dimness behind him. The winter light outlines him in pale silver, catching on the folds of his heavy wool tunic. The fabric is thick and hangs low, almost to the knees, the dark brown dyed so deep it seems to drink in the daylight. At his waist, a sturdy leather belt, cracked but well cared for, supports a small knife in a smooth, dark sheath, its handle worn by years of familiar use. His boots are polished but bear the faintest trace of frost along the seams, evidence of an early walk through cold streets. The master's face carries no obvious emotion. His mouth is set in a line neither tight nor slack. His eyes, narrowed slightly from habit, from years of examining fine detail, pass over the apprentices like a merchant counting coins. One sweep of the gaze, slow enough to register every figure but without pausing on anyone long enough to cause direct alarm. The yard seems to breathe differently now. The air has weight. One apprentice grips his broom handle harder, the knuckles whitening. Another adjusts his stance so subtly it's almost invisible, a half step closer to the neat pile of swept dust. The master walks forward. His stride is unhurried, each step measured so precisely that the distance between bootfuls is identical. The sound is a quiet, deliberate thud against the flagstones. As he passes the small open doorway to the storeroom, his head turns the barest fraction, not enough to slow his pace, but enough to assess the neatness of the stacked goods within. The gesture is casual, but the apprentices know it is not without meaning. A faint smell of tanned leather comes with him, mixed with a sharper tang, the scent of oil used to keep tools from rusting. It's a smell tied to the trade itself, something you can never quite wash from your clothes no matter how you try. He stops in the middle of the yard, his boots planted firmly on the stone. For a long moment he says nothing. He tilts his head just slightly, squinting up toward the pale winter sky. Perhaps he's judging the light. Perhaps he's thinking of the hour. Merchants always have the clock in their minds, when to open the gates, when the best customers arrive, when the sun's position means the rush will soon begin. The silence stretches. The market's distant hum seems louder now by contrast. One apprentice dares to resume sweeping, but slower, more careful, as if each bristle stroke must be as even as the master's own heartbeat. Then, without warning, the master speaks. His voice is not loud, but it carries across the space with ease, the way a voice does when it belongs to someone used to being heard. "Open the gates!" And just like that, the spell breaks. Two apprentices move at once, rushing, not too quickly, to the heavy wooden doors at the far end. The iron hinges groan as they are pushed wide, the gap opening like the slow pull of a curtain. Beyond it, the colours, sounds, and smells of the market burst forward, vendors calling, wheels clattering, the scent of baking bread, mingling with fish and herbs. The day has begun. The quiet, controlled yard will not be quiet again until nightfall. Segment 12. The market opens. The day's true beginning is not marked by a clock, nor by the first stroke of the church bell. It begins when the gates are opened. Until this moment, the yard has been a contained world, its walls holding in the smells of damp wood, coal smoke, and woolen cloth, its sounds a muted murmur of low voices and the scrape of crates being dragged across stone. But the instant the gates shift on their hinges, the outside world pushes in like a tide that can no longer be held back. It comes first as a breath of air, cool, damp, tasting faintly of frost and chimney soot. Carried within it are scents that do not belong to the yard at all. The warm, malty perfume of fresh bread loaves, so vivid you can almost feel the steam rising off them. The briny sharpness of fish just lifted from river baskets. The pungent, eye-watering tang of onions. The earthy sweetness of carrots with their green tops still damp from the soil. Beneath it all lingers the deep animal smell of raw hides stacked somewhere out of sight, and the faint spice of cinnamon and cloves drifting from a distant merchant's stall. Then, sound. The market speaks in 100 voices at once. At first it is just a distant hum, like bees in summer, but with every heartbeat it swells and separates into distinct threads. The sing-song pitch of a fruit seller praising his pears. The sharp, rhythmic clink of coins being counted into a palm. The uneven thump of cartwheels over loose cobbles. The meaty chop of a butcher's cleaver on his block, followed by the dull splatter of fat. Somewhere, a goat bleats, sharp and indignant. Children laugh, their voices weaving between the deeper tones of adults bargaining over cheese or cloth. A woman's voice rises above the rest, calling out a price, then softens into a chuckle at some unseen reply. The hinges complain as the gates are pulled wide, their iron joints giving a long, groaning creak that is almost swallowed by the swell of noise outside. Through the widening gap, figures appear. Silhouettes at first, blurred by the pale winter mist that hangs low over the street. Then they resolve into colour and detail. A man in a faded green cloak, beard stiff with frost. A boy balancing a basket of apples on his shoulder, one slipping and rolling into the gutter. A woman in a patched blue kirtle guiding a goat by a frayed rope, its hooves clattering sharply against the stones. The master stands just inside the threshold, his posture straight but not stiff, one gloved hand resting on his belt. His eyes flick from person to person with the quick weighing glance of a man who has done this for years, sorting regulars from strangers, deciding in an instant which might be worth a longer conversation, which might be looking for a bargain, and which will simply pass by. Behind him, the apprentices move with quiet efficiency. One carries a shallow tray of goods polished until they catch the pale morning light, arranging them in neat rows upon the low wooden table at the gate. Another wheels a small cart forward, its weight making the handles creak softly, each bump over the uneven yard a dull, hollow thud. They speak little. They have done this so many mornings that their bodies know the motions without thought. Outside, the scene sharpens. Painted shop signs swing gently from their iron hooks. Bundles of dyed cloth, red, blue, ochre, hang like bright flags from stall poles. A wheelwright leans against his doorway, rubbing sawdust from his hands. Steam rises from a nearby cauldron where a cook ladles out broth to a man cupping his hands for warmth. Then the first customer steps inside. He moves slowly, almost ceremonially, as if crossing some invisible threshold between the street and the place where trade begins. The master greets him with a nod, not too quick, not too warm, just enough to open the unspoken ritual of the day. There will be no rush. This is a dance of pleasantries and glances, of examining goods without speaking their price aloud. And with that single step, the day truly begins. The market has arrived. The quiet of dawn will not return until the gates close again. Segment 13. The first customer. The morning mist still clings to the edges of the market yard, curling lazily around the timbers of the gate. Beyond, the sound of the street is muted, just the distant creak of a cart axle, the muffled call of a fishmonger setting up further down the lane. Inside the yard it is quieter still. The stillness has weight, as if holding its breath for the day to begin. The master stands at his stall, arms loosely at his sides. The table before him is neat, every item arranged with a practiced eye. Not a scrap of cloth is out of place, not a tool angled carelessly. His breath rises in faint clouds. The faint scent of leather oil, wood shavings, and damp wool hangs in the air. From the gate, footsteps approach, slow, steady, measured. The figure emerges from the mist like something half-remembered. A man, neither young nor old. His face is weathered, the skin at the corners of his eyes etched with fine creases, the marks of long years under sun and wind. A close-trimmed beard, dark but streaked with grey, frames his mouth. His cloak is of heavy wool, the kind that holds its shape even when damp. The weave is coarse but clean, smelling faintly of lanolin. Tiny beads of moisture cling to the fibres, catching the weak morning light. Beneath the hem, his boots are broad and practical, the leather cracked where it bends at the ankle. A faint frost still dusts the edges of the soles, a trace of the street he has just walked. In his left hand he carries a leather purse, worn at the edges, the drawstring loose. It hangs open just enough that the soft chink of metal carries with each step, though it is not the careless clatter of wealth. It is the muted, deliberate sound of coins counted and recounted, each one with a purpose. The master meets his eyes but does not speak. In the market, greeting too soon can be an intrusion. The customer should be allowed to arrive, to breathe, to let his gaze wander. The man stops before the table. His eyes pass over the knives, rows of them, each resting on a narrow strip of cloth, blades polished to a pale gleam, handles of smooth oak or ash riveted with brass. Some are plain and workmanlike, others carry a subtle curve, a slight flare at the pommel, details meant to please the hand as much as the eye. Beside the knives are the small leather pouches, their seams tight, the hides polished to a warm chestnut sheen. Beyond them, neat bundles of wool thread lie in stacked coils, dyed in earthy tones, green like crushed nettles, brown like wet soil, cream like unbleached linen. The man reaches out, not for the pouches or the thread, but for a knife. He does not snatch at it. His fingers close slowly around the handle, testing the weight, the balance. He tilts the blade toward the light, catching the faint glimmer of its edge. He does not press his thumb to it, just lets his skin hover a breath above, feeling the line of sharpness without touching. The master shifts slightly, resting his fingertips on the edge of the table near a matching sheath. He does not push it forward, but the gesture is there, quiet, suggestive. Good balance, he says softly, the words more like a murmur than a pitch. Holds its edge. The man nods once, sliding the blade into the sheath. The leather whispers against the steel, the sound almost lost beneath the faint murmur of voices from beyond the wall. They stand in silence for several breaths. This too is part of the bargain. Words fill space. Silence can seal it. At last the man loosens the purse in his left hand, tipping it just enough for a glimpse of what's inside. A few coins, one silver penny at the top, worn almost smooth by years of passing from hand to hand. Beneath it, several copper pieces, their reddish tones dulled by the oils of countless palms. He selects 2 coins, one silver, one copper, and places them side by side on the table. The gesture is deliberate, his fingers lingering for a heartbeat before drawing back. The master studies them for a moment. Not because he doubts their worth, he could tell their weight with his eyes closed, but because it is polite to give the act its due pause. Then with a slow nod, he accepts. The knife, now sheathed, is lifted and placed directly into the man's waiting hand, not tossed, not slid, but set there as one might place a key in a palm. The man inclines his head, a silent thanks. He tucks the knife under his cloak, its weight vanishing into the folds. Without another word, he turns and walks toward the gate. His boots sound softly on the worn planks. The frost at their edges begins to melt as he steps back into the mist beyond. A moment of stillness follows. Then, faint but clear, another set of footsteps approaches. A different rhythm this time. The second customer of the day. Segment 14. The Bargainer. The market yard has shifted in the time since the first customer left. The mist that clung to the wooden beams of the stalls is loosening now, breaking apart into delicate wisps that wander off toward the rooftops. The sound of the well at the far corner, water pulled up in a rope-worn bucket, drifts faintly across the cobblestones. A low, steady hum of voices rises from the other side of the square where sellers of fish and onions are calling in half-hearted tones, their words rolling together in the damp air. The master does not move. His hands remain resting lightly on the edge of the table, fingertips just brushing the grain of the wood. He waits. Waiting is part of the craft. The right customer will come, and they will step into the moment like a bead rolling into the hollow of a bowl. This time the approach is not slow. The second set of footsteps strikes a sharper rhythm, heels landing firmly, pausing just long enough to take in the scene, then stepping forward again with quiet certainty. A figure emerges from between two neighbouring stalls. She is not a stranger here. The master has seen her before, though only at a distance, usually bent over a sack of barley or measuring cloth with the swift fingers of someone used to weighing value in both coin and usefulness. Today she comes directly to his table. Her linen wimple is tied close under her chin, crisp at the edges but faintly spotted from the morning's damp. A deep blue cloak hangs from her shoulders, its dye once vibrant but now worn by sun, wind and rain into a softer shade, like the edge of the sky before dusk. The hem is uneven, showing signs of repair, an extra panel stitched into place with small, precise stitches. She does not greet him. Her eyes move instantly to the goods. They sweep over the knives first, pausing on the ones with polished handles, then to the stacked pouches, and finally to the neat coils of thread. Her gaze lingers here only a heartbeat before returning to the knives. Without asking, she picks one up, a long, narrow blade with a handle of ash wood. The grain is dark and close, the surface burnished until it feels like smooth stone under the fingers. She tilts it slightly toward the light. The steel catches the pale winter sun and sends back a thin, cold glint. Her thumb runs along the spine of the blade. She tests the balance, rocking it lightly from hilt to tip. Her eyes flick up, meeting the master's for just a moment before she names her price. 2 pennies, she says. The tone is flat, final, as if the decision was made before she left her house. The master lets the words sit. Bargaining is as much about space as speech. He lets the silence pool between them, and the space grows just enough for her to shift her weight from one foot to the other. That one, he says at last, is worth 3. A faint narrowing of her eyes, not anger, calculation. She sets the knife down with a little more care than necessary, the way someone might place an egg on a table. It is a deliberate gesture saying, I could take this or leave it. She moves on to a pouch, soft leather, tanned to a warm brown, with a drawstring of braided cord. She pinches the base between her fingers, testing the stitching, then opens it slightly to look inside. This might be worth a penny, she says in the same clipped tone, though the way her fingers linger on the seam suggests she thinks otherwise. The master offers no reply. Instead, he watches her hands. Bargainers reveal more through their grip than their words. She sets the pouch down and reaches for the wool thread. Her thumb presses into the fibres, testing their give. She twists the coil slightly. The dye holds. She nods, though not at him, more at the quality of the thing itself. Tell you what, she says finally, pointing first to the knife, then the pouch, then the thread. All 3, for 5 pennies. The master considers her face, not the price, not the goods, but the set of her jaw, the way her breath slows while she waits. Bargains are not only about coin, they are about measuring the weight of will between 2 people. After a pause long enough for a crow to cry twice from the nearby roof, he nods. Done. She does not smile, but something in her posture shifts, loosening. She reaches into a small cloth bag at her belt and draws out the coins, a mix of worn copper and a single dull silver. She sets them down, and he counts them by sound rather than sight, the clink of each coin against the wood marking its value. He wraps the knife, pouch, and thread into a square of undyed cloth, tying it with a short piece of string. The bundle is plain but secure. She tucks it into the crook of her arm with a practiced motion. Before turning away, she gives the table one last look, not searching for something she missed, but committing its contents to memory for the next time. Then she steps back into the flow of the market. Her blue cloak sways with her stride, and within moments she is gone, swallowed by the pale mist still curling at the square's edge. The master exhales. His breath drifts upward, dissolving into the cool air. Some customers leave you with heavier pockets. Others leave you sharper. Segment 15, The Errand Boy. The late morning has the colour of old parchment, pale, warm in some places, yet smudged with the damp grey of lingering mist. The market square is alive, but not loud. It hums. Voices rise and fall like the tide, soft bargaining, muted greetings, the occasional bark of a dog. Somewhere in the distance, iron meets iron in the slow rhythm of a blacksmith's hammer. The scent of wood smoke drifts in from the east, faint enough that it could almost be imagined. The master stands behind his stall, hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. He is not still. His fingers drift, nudging a small stack of jars a fraction of an inch, brushing away a speck of grit, shifting a folded cloth so its edge lies straighter. It is not disorder he fears. It is the stillness. A stallholder's hands are rarely at rest. Then, footsteps. Small, light, quick. The kind that slip in between heavier boots and clattering carts without ever colliding. At first they seem random, a soft patter here, a scuff there, but as they draw closer there is purpose in their rhythm. Someone making their way through the tangle of the crowd with a destination already fixed in mind. The boy appears at the edge of the stall as if stepping out of the mist itself. He cannot be more than 10 years old, though there is something in his expression, something sharp that belongs to someone older. His tunic is a dull brown, worn thin at the elbows, fraying into loose threads at the cuffs. It is far too large for his narrow frame, the hem swaying around his knees. His legs are bare, splattered with dried mud, the pattern of his morning journey still clinging to his skin. Where shoes should be, strips of cloth are wrapped around his feet, tied tight enough to hold but darkened with damp. Across his back hangs a leather satchel, so long it nearly reaches his waist. The leather is soft from years of use, marked with scratches and stains that suggest it has known both rain and dust many times over. The strap digs into one shoulder and he shifts it as he stops, as if to ease the weight. He does not speak right away. Instead, he swings the satchel down from his shoulder and sets it gently on the table. One hand holds it upright, while the other works at the cord that binds its mouth. His movements are quick but controlled. His fingers know this not well. There is a certain guardedness in the way he cups the bag toward himself, as though shielding its contents from prying eyes. From within he pulls a folded scrap of parchment. It is creased and slightly softened at the corners from being handled. He smooths it once against his palm before sliding it across the table. The master takes it. The list is short. 3 items, written in a neat but slightly uncertain hand. 2 are common enough. The third is not. It is rare, even here. Something one does not sell to strangers. The master looks up. The boy is watching him with the stillness of a cat, shoulders drawn in, eyes wide but not nervous. His hair, dark and unevenly cut, falls into his face, and he makes no effort to brush it away. There is a faint smear of dirt along his jawline, but his gaze is clean, unflinching. "You came from the west gate?" the master asks, his voice as calm as the list in his hand. The boy nods. "Ran most of the way," he says simply, and the way he says it is not boastful, it is just fact. 2 of the requested goods are easy enough to gather. The master's hands move slowly, as though the act of finding them is part of a ritual. For the third, he must kneel, reaching into a small chest hidden beneath the stall. He draws out a cloth pouch, the fabric worn smooth at the corners from handling. "This one," the master says as he places it on the table, "is worth more than you are. Keep it wrapped." The boy smiles, quick, lopsided, and the smile vanishes just as quickly. Without comment, he opens his satchel and carefully tucks the bundle between the other items, arranging them so they will not shift on the journey back. He produces payment from the small pouch at his belt. 2 coins, dull with age, and a strip of smoked meat wrapped in leaves. He places all 3 on the table. The master accepts the coins but pushes the meat back toward him. "For the road," he says. The boy hesitates only for a heartbeat before tucking the meat inside his tunic. "I'll tell her you said so," he replies, and though the master does not know who her is, he does not ask. The satchel goes back over the boy's shoulder in one smooth motion. Without lingering, without letting his eyes wander to the other stalls, he slips back into the crowd. The market closes around him like water over a stone. He does not slow, he does not look back, and within a dozen paces, the mist swallows him whole. The master remains at his table, fingers brushing the coins that are still warm from the boy's hand. The hum of the market continues. Nothing has changed. Segment 16, The Cobbler's Corner. The market spills into narrower streets where stalls give way to fixed shops, stone or timber fronted, their thresholds worn smooth from years of feet passing in and out. The The cobbler's workshop sits at the bend of one such lane. It is small, its roof dipping slightly in the middle as if bowing to the years. The sign above the door is a simple one, a leather shoe, crudely painted but unmistakable, swinging gently from two iron hooks. The paint has faded to a soft rust red, the wood beneath silvered by weather. Inside, the air changes. It is warmer here, still, thick with the mingled scents of tanned hide, beeswax, and old wood. A faint metallic tang lingers too from the nails and tacks that gleam in small piles on the bench. The cobbler sits low on a stool that has moulded to the shape of his body over decades. His back is curved, his shoulders rounded forward, as though every stitch he has ever made has slowly drawn him inward. He wears a leather apron so stained it is almost black, the surface shiny in places where his hands rest between tasks. Before him, on a wide plank table, lie half-finished shoes, soles waiting for uppers, uppers waiting for soles. The leather is thick, unyielding to a stranger's hand, but under his fingers it bends, softens, obeys. He is threading a curved needle with cord so tightly spun it looks more like wire. His hands move with the rhythm of habit, the kind that has no need for thought. The needle dips, disappears into the seam, and reappears on the other side, pulling the leather closer together with each pass. The sound is subtle but constant, a faint creak, a soft pull, the whisper of cord through hide. At his feet lies a small pile of scraps, edges trimmed away, pieces too short to be used. Some are curled at the edges like dried leaves, others still hold the smell of the tannery, sharp and almost sour. A cat sleeps on this pile, its fur patterned in brown and grey stripes, the tip of its tail twitching now and then in a dream. The cobbler's tools are simple, each with its place, awls of different lengths, their wooden handles polished by years of grip, small hammers with heads dulled smooth, iron shears heavy enough to cut through thick hide with a single bite. He keeps them arranged on a shelf just above the workbench, their positions so fixed in his mind that he can reach for any one of them without lifting his gaze from the task at hand. The door opens, light spills in, catching on the floating dust. A man enters, tall, with one knee bound in cloth, his gait uneven. He carries under his arm a pair of boots so worn that the soles have thinned to almost nothing. The leather at the toes has split, showing the stitching beneath. The cobbler looks up, but not with surprise. Customers arrive at all hours. Repairs wait for no schedule. Without speaking, he gestures to the bench, and the man sets the boots down. His voice, when it comes, is low and even. "These have seen better days," he says, turning one in his hands. His thumbs press the leather at the cracks, testing it. "I can patch them, but you'll need new soles before winter. The ground will eat through these before the first frost." The man nods, and for a moment the two simply stand there, one seated, one standing, listening to the muffled bustle of the lane outside. Then the cobbler sets to work, pulling a short stool closer for the man to sit. He begins with the awl, piercing neat holes along the torn seam. His hands are quick but never rushed. There is a patience here that comes from knowing every shortcut only leads to more work later. The needle follows, looping the cord through with steady, even pulls. The rhythm is the same as before, creak, pull, whisper, and the sound fills the small shop. The cat stretches, yawns silently, and curls deeper into the leather scraps. Outside, a cart rattles past, and for a moment the shop trembles. But inside, the work continues unchanged as it has for years, as it will for years more. By the time the man leaves, his boots are whole again, not new, but sound. He thanks the cobbler with a nod and steps back into the lane. The cobbler watches him go, then turns to the next pair waiting on the bench. His fingers find the awl. The rhythm resumes. Segment 17. The Market Gossip. Not far from the cobbler's shop, the lane widens again into a small square, less grand than the main market, but no less alive with voices. Here, the air is full of fragments of conversation, half heard and half believed. Two women stand close together near a vegetable stall, their baskets hooked into the crook of one arm, the other hand gesturing in small, precise movements as they speak. Their heads are tilted slightly forward, the way people lean in when they don't want their words to carry too far. One wears a wimple of pale linen, edges pressed flat but already catching tiny motes of dust from the street. The other has a woolen hood pushed back enough to show streaks of grey hair wound into a tight braid. Their clothing marks them as tradesmen's wives, neither rich nor poor, but accustomed to bargaining for every onion, every egg. Between them lies a small pile of turnips, the kind that have overwintered in the cellar and grown a little tough. They touch the vegetables absently, as though the movement makes the exchange seem like ordinary haggling. But their eyes are fixed on each other, and their voices drop to a near whisper. "And she swears she saw it herself," says the one in the wimple, her voice low but urgent, right outside the baker's door, at first light. The other woman's brows rise, her lips pressing into a thin line as she waits for more. A stranger, the wimpled woman continues, tall, with a cloak so dark you couldn't tell if it was black or brown, just watching the street, not moving. She went in to fetch bread, and when she came out, he was gone. A pause. The woman in the hood shakes her head slightly, more from habit than disbelief. There's always strangers this time of year. The fairs bring them in from everywhere. Yes, but she says he had no pack, no cart, nothing to sell, just standing. The words hang there for a moment, the suggestion heavier than the detail itself. Nearby, a fishmonger's boy splashes water over his display, the scent of river fish cutting through the air. A group of children run past, laughing too loudly, nearly knocking over a basket of apples. The two women shift aside but never break their circle. The hooded one leans closer now, lowering her voice until it is almost lost in the market's murmur. Have you heard what they're saying about the miller's apprentice? The wimpled woman's eyes sharpen. No. They say he's been seen up by the old wall at night, not once, several times, always with a bundle, and not the kind a man carries from work. A small silence follows, each woman weighing the possibility, the danger, and the pleasure of knowing something others do not. The wimpled one inhales as if to speak, but stops when a customer steps between them to reach for the turnips. They shift to polite smiles, nodding to the stallholder, hands busy now with weighing and counting coins. The gossip is temporarily folded away, like a letter tucked into a pocket, ready to be opened again when no one is looking. Across the square, an old man selling honey catches their glance and raises a hand in greeting. His stall is small, just a table with earthenware jars, each sealed with wax and wrapped in cloth. He calls out an offer, his voice warm, breaking the thread of their private talk. The women take their baskets and move on together, their steps in rhythm, their heads bent close once more. Behind them, the murmur of the market continues. Buyers and sellers, promises and prices, laughter and complaint. Somewhere in that tangle of voices, the truth, whatever it is, will be lost, replaced by another tale before the week is out. Segment 18. The Moneylender's Table. At the far edge of the square, where the cobblestones narrow into an alley, sits a man behind a small, weather-darkened table. No goods to tempt the eye, no bright ribbons or baskets of food, only a scattering of wax tablets, a pair of heavy ledgers bound in leather, and a set of small iron weights. He is the moneylender, not the only one in town, but the one people come to when they can't wait for the market to go in their favour. His stool is low, the legs uneven, so that each time he shifts his weight it gives a faint creak. A woolen cloak is wrapped tightly around his shoulders, its hem frayed where it brushes the ground. The hood is drawn forward, but not far enough to hide his eyes, sharp and still, scanning the passing crowd. In front of him sits a small square chest bound with iron strips. Its lock gleams faintly where it's been polished by use, and next to it rests a worn leather purse tied with cord. Now and then he loosens the cord just enough to slip his fingers inside, counting coins by touch alone. A woman approaches, clutching the edge of her apron in both hands. She glances around once, twice, before leaning forward. Her voice is low, her words halting. The moneylender listens without moving, the tips of his fingers resting lightly on the open ledger. He makes no sound until she is finished. Then, with slow precision, he takes up a stylus, dips it into a pot of ink, and begins to write. Each character is small and deliberate, as though carved rather than drawn. When he is done, he blows lightly on the ink before closing the ledger. From the chest he takes a small bundle wrapped in cloth. The weight is unmistakable, the sound of coins settling against one another. He places it in the woman's hands without ceremony. She nods once, her face unreadable, and turns away, tucking the bundle deep into the folds of her clothing before vanishing into the market crowd. Another figure steps forward, this one a man in a tunic patched at the elbow. He carries no basket, no sign of trade, only a strip of parchment clutched tightly in his fist. The moneylender studies it briefly, then tilts his head toward the iron weights. From a separate pouch he draws out silver coins, setting them down one by one, the sound of metal on wood clean and sharp in the cool air. Around them, the market continues in its noisy rhythm. A hawker calling out the price of fresh eels, a donkey braying somewhere in the side street, a child crying after being pulled away from a sweetmeat stall. But at the moneylender's table the pace never changes. Every motion is measured, every word brief, every exchange recorded with care. Some people pass quickly by, unwilling to meet his gaze. Others slow just enough to glance at the ledgers, wondering whose names fill those pages and what debts are hidden there. As the sun edges higher, a faint glint of light catches on the corner of the iron-bound chest. The moneylender notices, reaches forward and rests his hand on it, not in fear, but as if to remind himself that it is still there, still his. The morning will bring more borrowers. The afternoon, perhaps, will bring those who come to repay. but for now the table remains the same. 2 ledgers, a chest, a man, and the quiet arithmetic of trust and obligation. Segment 19. The church bells. It begins faintly, almost as though the air itself is clearing its throat. A single low tone, rounded and deep, spreads outward in a soft, slow wave. The sound does not shout, it simply arrives, steady and unhurried, brushing along the market square, slipping into narrow alleys and touching the windows of houses that still hold the morning chill. Up in the church tower, the great bell sways in its wooden cradle. The timber frame is dark with centuries of smoke, candle soot, and rain, its grain polished by the slow, inevitable friction of rope and wheel. The rope itself is thick and worn, with faint grooves where countless hands have gripped and pulled. The bell ringer is a broad-shouldered man, with sleeves rolled high, his forearms corded with muscle from years of this same patient labour. He leans back with each pull, his boots planted firmly on the smooth flagstones, the movement more like a dance than brute force. Pull, release, sway, return. The bell's mouth is a dark curve of metal, mottled by age, green at the edges where rain and air have kissed it for decades. With each swing it gathers air and then lets it go in a resonant hum that seems to touch the bones rather than just the ears. The sound rolls down from the tower and over the churchyard. Here, crooked gravestones lean this way and that, their carved letters softened to near ghosts by centuries of wind. Some stones are marked with simple crosses, others with worn heraldic crests whose meaning has long faded from memory. Patches of lichen cling in pale green bursts, and tiny daisies poke up from the short, uneven grass. Beyond the yard, the bell's voice moves into the town itself. In the baker's shop, a young apprentice pauses mid-knead, his hands frozen in the pale mound of dough, head tilted toward the sound. The blacksmith rests his hammer on the anvil, letting the iron cool a fraction longer. A laundress, standing at a wooden tub, closes her eyes for a moment, her hands submerged in soapy water that smells faintly of ash and lye. Even the animals respond. A horse tied outside the tavern flicks an ear and exhales in a slow, heavy breath. A pair of chickens, picking in the dust by a cart, pause for the briefest instant before continuing their search for grain. Inside the church, the cool air wraps around you like a shawl. The light filtering through the stained glass windows is dim and dappled, painting the flagstones in patches of muted red, blue, and gold. The scent of beeswax lingers near the altar, where thick candles stand in pools of hardened wax. Wooden pews, polished by generations of hands and cloaks, line the nave in even rows, their edges rounded by touch and time. The bell does not hurry. Each toll is given space for its echo to curl around the tower's stone walls, to slip down into the street, to drift over rooftops and fade into the open air. In that space, people move a little slower. Words are left unspoken until the next peal has passed. Even the market's noise, clinking scales, shouted prices, the soft rustle of cloth, seems to weave itself around the sound rather than push against it. And somewhere, in a cramped attic room above the cobbler's shop, a man lies in bed listening. His eyes are closed, though he is not asleep. The bell reminds him of his childhood, of mornings when the sound was the first thing to reach him, even before his mother's voice. He imagines the rope moving in the bell ringer's hands, the cool stone of the tower underfoot, the narrow windows framing the pale sky. When the last note finally fades, it leaves behind a stillness that feels almost fragile. For a breath or two, the town seems to hold itself in place, as if reluctant to break the silence too soon. But slowly, life resumes. The blacksmith lifts his hammer. The baker dusts his hands and turns back to the dough. In the tower, the bell rests once more in its frame, heavy and waiting, ready to speak again when the hour calls for it. Segment 20. The Stone Bridge. Leaving the slow toll of the bells behind, the road curves toward the river, a broad, steady ribbon of water that has been here far longer than the town itself. The air changes as you approach. It cools, carrying the damp, earthy scent of moss and the faint metallic tang of the water. The sound shifts too, trading the muffled murmur of town life for the quiet lap of current against stone. The bridge appears gradually. At first it's just the rounded tops of its arches visible above the bank, pale grey against the green of the willows. Then the whole structure comes into view, squat, solid, and enduring. Its stones are rough and uneven in colour, some nearly white, others dark and wet from recent rain. In places, tiny seams between the blocks are softened by tufts of grass, wildflowers, or stubborn moss. It has stood here for centuries, linking two halves of a community, enduring every flood, frost, and footstep. The surface is worn smooth by the countless boots, hooves, and cartwheels that have passed over it. In the deepest part of each depression, small puddles linger, reflecting the pale clouds overhead. As you step onto the bridge, you feel the faint vibration of movement underfoot. A cart rattles toward you, pulled by a patient-looking horse with a dull chestnut coat. The driver nods in greeting, the iron rims of the wheels clinking softly over the stones. Behind him, a pair of children walk hand in hand, carrying baskets of bread wrapped in cloth. Halfway across, the view opens wide. Upstream, the river narrows slightly, its surface broken by the tips of old wooden posts, the remnants of some forgotten structure. The current curls around them, whispering in a language older than the bridge itself. Downstream, the water widens into a slow pool where ducks drift lazily, their heads dipping under the surface before reappearing with small silver flickers of fish. The parapet, the low wall along the edge, is just high enough to lean on. Its top stones are rounded from years of elbows and palms resting there. A carved mark, nearly worn smooth, hints at a mason's pride centuries ago. The warmth of the sun, faint though it is, lingers in the stone under your hands. Here, you can hear both the town and the countryside at once. Behind you, faint voices and the occasional ring of a hammer drift through the air. Ahead, fields stretch in muted greens and browns, dotted with sheep that move like slow clouds across the earth. Every so often a rider passes, hooves clicking softly, leather saddle creaking with the rhythm of the horse's gait. Sometimes it's a merchant on his way to the next market town, other times a messenger, his cloak flaring in the wind, but often it's simply a farmer heading home before the evening cool sets in. If you lean over the edge, you can watch the water sliding past in slow layers, dark and glassy in the middle, rippled and silver where it meets the stones. Here and there, sunlight catches on the surface, scattering bright shards of gold into the air before they vanish again into shadow. The bridge does not rush anyone. It accepts each step, each passing cart, with the same quiet patience it has held for generations. And as you reach the far side, you might glance back and imagine all those who have crossed here before you. Pilgrims in worn leather boots, soldiers in mail with their spears slung high, lovers meeting in the middle when the town slept. The river keeps flowing, the bridge keeps standing, and life keeps moving, at its own unhurried pace. Segment 21. The Market at Dusk. Crossing the arched stone bridge, you feel the shift immediately, leaving behind the quiet hum of the riverbank for the layered energy of a town winding toward evening. The cobblestones beneath your feet are still holding the day's warmth, radiating it upward in gentle waves that mingle with the cooling air. The market square opens slowly, as if the streets are guiding you toward its centre. At first, you glimpse the edge of a cloth awning, flapping softly. Then you hear the clink of metal weights against a brass scale, and then, all at once, the square appears before you, its space irregular, shaped not by design, but by centuries of worn paths, rebuilt corners, and buildings leaning just slightly over the scene below. The light is low now, the sun slipping behind the roof lines, pouring its last amber glow across the square. That light catches on the polished rims of wooden buckets, glints in the thin film of water sloshing in a fishmonger's barrels, and deepens the earthy reds and muted ochres of the cloth hanging at a wool merchant's stall. Voices murmur all around, not loud or hurried, but layered like a low tide pulling at the shore. A farmer offers the last of his apples for a fraction of their morning price, holding one up in his hand so its skin shines in the fading light. A tanner folds strips of leather, the smell of oak bark and animal hide rising from his table in slow waves. From somewhere deeper in the market comes the steady, soft thud of a pestle grinding herbs, an almost hypnotic rhythm beneath the drifting conversations. Each stall seems to hold its own world. A weaver's table displays bolts of cloth stacked like tidy rainbows, deep woad blue, pale undyed cream, and the warm rusty red of madder root dye. The wool is thick, coarse to the touch, promising warmth against winter winds. A potter nearby runs his fingers along the rim of a fresh jug as if smoothing a memory into it before wrapping it in cloth for a customer. Children weave between the grown-ups, chasing each other in short bursts of giggles, then stopping to watch a street player perched on a low stool in the corner of the square. His wooden pipe carries a slow, droning tune, something old with no beginning or end, drawing in a small circle of listeners who stand quietly, letting the melody fold into the air. The smells are richer now as cooking fires are lit across the town. Sweet roasted onions drift in from a nearby doorway. Somewhere bread is baking, the yeasty scent catching in the breeze and mingling with the sharper tang of vinegar from a pickle seller's barrel. A woman ladles steaming cider into clay cups, the pale gold liquid catching the fading sunlight like liquid honey. The wind moves in gentle passes through the square, lifting the edges of cloth awnings so they ripple like the surface of a pond. The air shifts, now bringing the scent of fresh herbs, now the salty trace of fish, now the faint, smoky curl of someone roasting chestnuts nearby. Merchants begin their slow ritual of closing for the night. The fishmonger pours the last of his water from the barrels, watching it run along the grooves of the cobblestones before vanishing into the drains. A baker brushes crumbs from his counter, stacking his remaining loaves carefully into baskets, each movement unhurried and familiar from years of repetition. Near the far wall of the square, a boy with a bundle of rushlights calls out his goods, his voice just cracking into adulthood. He passes a cooper tightening the metal bands on a small barrel, the rhythmic clink-clink of his hammer mingling with the last exchanges of coins and thanks. As the sun finally dips away, the first oil lamps are lit. One by one they bloom into small golden circles, their light catching in the polished brass scales, the glass bottles of an apothecary's stall, and the faces of the few lingering customers. The shadows grow longer, softer, as though the whole square is exhaling. The market does not end all at once. It fades. A conversation trails off. The sound of a shutter being closed, a chair scraped gently across stone, the final call of the rushlight boy, growing fainter as he moves toward another street. And then, as if on cue, the church bell tolls the evening hour. Its deep, patient tone hangs in the air, marking the quiet handover from day to night. The square remains, less busy now, but still breathing, still holding the warmth of the day, waiting for morning to begin the cycle again. Segment 22, the narrow lantern-lit alley. The market's hum fades behind you, step by step, like the ebb of a tide pulling back into the night. The bright chatter and clink of coins are gone now, replaced by a thinner, softer air that seems to hold its breath between the walls. You have turned into a smaller street, one so narrow that if you reached out your arms, your fingertips might almost brush both sides at once. The stones beneath your feet change here, less even, more worn. Some jut upward slightly, others are hollowed where centuries of feet have passed. Your steps find a quiet rhythm, accompanied only by the faint tap of water dripping somewhere ahead. Above, the houses lean towards each other, their upper floors overhanging the street so closely that they seem to bow together, like old neighbours trading secrets. Timber beams, darkened with age, cross overhead in irregular patterns, and in the narrow ribbon of sky between them, the moon hangs, thin and pale, wrapped in a soft veil of drifting cloud. Lanterns hang at intervals from crooked wooden posts, their iron frames blackened by years of use. The flames within them are small but steady, casting little islands of gold on the cobblestones. In between those patches of light, the shadows are deep enough to hide a cat, a rat, or a memory. You move through this alternating pattern of light and dark, each pool of lantern glow feeling like a moment of warmth before stepping back into cool shadow. The air is cooler here than in the open square. It carries a layered mix of scents: damp stone, faint wood smoke from some far-off hearth, and something sharper. Perhaps vinegar from a shop you passed earlier, now lingering in the cracks of the street. From somewhere close, the faint aroma of rosemary drifts down from a drying bundle hung on a windowsill. You can almost imagine the sprigs swaying gently, whispering against one another in the breeze. Your hand brushes the wall beside you. The surface is rough, with patches where the mortar has crumbled to powder. You feel the coolness of the stone seep into your fingertips. Here and there you pass doorways, some sealed tight with heavy iron hinges, others open just a fraction, spilling slivers of firelight onto the street. Through one, you catch the warm murmur of voices. Through another, the brief muffled sound of a lute's string being plucked, then tuned. From ahead, two pale eyes gleam, caught in the lantern light. A cat sits poised in the middle of the alley, tail curled neatly around its paws, watching you with the patient curiosity of something that belongs more to the street than to any house. It blinks once, slowly, before slipping into the shadows, vanishing into a gap between stones you might never have noticed. The walls close in tighter and the air grows stiller. A single droplet falls from a gutter above, breaking the silence with a plink as it lands in a small puddle. The water ripples, and in its surface you glimpse a shimmering, fractured reflection of the moon. Somewhere overhead, a shutter creaks open. A faint light spills down, and you glimpse a woman leaning out, shaking a small rug, her hands practiced and unhurried. The soft beat of the fabric carries through the alley, then she disappears, and the shutter closes with a muted thud. The alley turns gently to the right, and there, at its end, glows one last lantern, its light warmer, more inviting than the rest. Beneath it, a wooden door sits framed by worn stone. Once painted red, it has faded to a soft, weathered rose, its surface lined with the thin cracks of age. Just beyond, you sense the presence of another street, one not yet visible, but alive with distant footsteps and a quiet ripple of laughter. You stand for a moment beneath that final pool of light, feeling the cool night on your skin, hearing the small sounds of a city breathing in its sleep. Then, with a slow breath, you take the last steps forward, ready to see where the alley will lead you next. Segment 23, the inn by the gate. The alley you've been following slowly widens, the cramped press of buildings falling away to reveal a broader, better lit street. Overhead, the night feels larger here, an open stretch of pale sky caught between the sloping eaves of old timber houses. Somewhere nearby you hear the muffled clatter of a cartwheel on cobblestone and the creak of a heavy gate hinge being tested by the breeze. It's then you notice it, a low inviting building just a stone's throw from the city's outer gate. The roof is broad and slightly bowed under the weight of years, its tiles the muted red-brown of baked clay. Its walls are plastered wattle, patched in places where the rain and sun have gnawed away at the surface, revealing the dark oak beams beneath. Above the sturdy wooden doorway hangs a painted sign, suspended from a bracket of curling wrought iron. The sign sways gently as you draw nearer, creaking faintly, and you catch the worn but still visible image, a foaming tankard, its froth spilling cheerfully down the sides. The gold paint of the lettering, once bright, now faded to the colour of old straw, still catches the glow of the lantern hung above it. The smell reaches you before you touch the door. It's a layered warmth, the tang of roasting meat, rich with fat, the deep, bready sweetness of fresh loaves cooling on a wooden board, and the earthy, familiar bitterness of ale casks opened earlier in the evening. There's wood smoke here too, soft and reassuring, the kind that clings to woolen cloaks and hair long after you've gone back out into the night. The door itself is thick oak, banded in iron, its hinges groaning as you push. A breath of warm air spills out, carrying with it a wash of voices and the faint twang of a stringed instrument. You step inside, and the cool night is replaced by a rich golden heat that seems to sink immediately into your bones. The light is soft, glowing from a great hearth set into the far wall. Its fire burns steadily, flames licking the blackened stones, casting long shadows across the low-beamed ceiling. The scent of the logs, seasoned oak mixed with the sharper tang of pine, threads through the room. Beneath your boots the floorboards are uneven, smoothed by centuries of feet. Scattered rush mats soften the sound of movement. To your left, a long oak table is crowded with earthenware mugs, some foaming with freshly poured ale, others left to grow flat while their owners lean in to speak in low, contented voices. A serving woman moves between tables with practiced ease, her linen apron marked faintly with flour and broth stains from the day's work. On her tray, shallow wooden bowls steam with a thick stew, its surface dotted with chopped herbs, the edges of the broth glistening with the richness of slow-cooked meat. She pauses now and then to refill a mug or exchange a few quick words with a regular, the flicker of a smile touching her face before she moves on. By the hearth, a traveller with travel-stained boots sits with his cloak drawn close, eyes half-lidded in drowsy comfort. Beside him, an old man cradles a small harp, plucking at the strings. Each note hangs in the air for a moment before melting into the general hum of the room. The melody isn't hurried, just a gentle wandering tune that seems content to go nowhere in particular. Near the bar, three men in weather-worn cloaks share a quiet conversation over their drinks. A pair of dice sits idle between them, forgotten mid-game, the players more interested now in swapping road stories than in winning. Above you, the heavy beams of the ceiling are dark with age, some etched with initials, dates, and small carved marks that have no meaning to you but might have meant something once. Bundles of dried herbs, lavender, sage, and rosemary hang from nails, their scent faint but present, a reminder of summer harvests long past. The innkeeper, a broad, steady man with a beard streaked silver, catches your eye. He sets down the cloth he's been using to polish a mug and nods, a small, wordless gesture of welcome. He points, almost imperceptibly, toward a small table tucked in the corner near the fire. You take the seat. The chair is old, its surface worn smooth, and when you rest your hands on the table's edge, you feel the faint grooves and notches left by generations before you. The heat of the fire reaches you in a slow wave, and for a moment the world outside, the cobbled street, the looming city gate, the dark night, feels far away. Here, there is only the low murmur of voices, the smell of bread and broth, the comfort of firelight, and the slow, unhurried sense that time has loosened its hold. Segment 24, The Gate at Night. You step out of the inn slowly, letting the heavy oak door close behind you with a muted thud. The sound lingers for a moment in the narrow street before it's swallowed by the quiet. The warmth of the fire, the scent of baked bread and roasted meat, the faint hum of voices. All of it fades, replaced by the night's cooler breath. The air here is sharper than before, carrying the smell of damp stone and the faint tang of wood smoke drifting from a chimney farther away. Your footsteps sound soft and deliberate on the cobbles, each one tapping gently into the silence. Ahead, the city's outer gate rises into view, a dark silhouette against the pale shimmer of the sky. It is not just a structure, but a presence. The twin gate towers stand tall and still, their stone base is solid, their timber frames leaning slightly inward as if conferring in hushed voices. Faint orange light seeps from the narrow slits near their tops, each one like a watchful half-lidded eye. As you draw closer, the details sharpen. The gate doors themselves are massive, Each slab of oak as thick as a man's arm is long, reinforced with wide iron bands that run across their grain. Centuries of use have left the wood marked, scratches from cart axles, gouges from careless loading, stains from rain that left dark streaks across the surface. Here and there the ironwork is pitted, but it holds strong, unbent by time. Set into the left door, a smaller postern gate is ajar, revealing a narrow slice of the world beyond. It's not enough to walk through without turning your shoulders, but just wide enough to glimpse the road and the faint silver line of grass under the moon. 2 guards keep watch. One leans lightly on his spear, shifting his weight from one leg to the other, the movement slow and practiced. The other stands straighter, his cloak drawn close around him. Both wear thick quilted tunics under their leather vests, and the moonlight catches on the metal tips of their spears. The brazier beside them glows softly, its heat pooling in the cold air like a hidden hearth. The flames move in slow waves, occasionally sending up a wandering spark that disappears into the dark. The sounds here are gentle, the occasional groan of the wood as the great doors settle on their hinges, the faint hiss and pop from the brazier. Far beyond the walls a single owl calls, its note floating across the empty fields. The air is still enough that you can hear the quiet shift of leather straps as one guard adjusts his grip, the creak muffled by wool and night. You step closer, feeling the texture of the cobblestones underfoot, worn smooth in some places, chipped in others. Passing the brazier, the sudden bloom of heat brushes your cheek, chasing away the chill for a heartbeat before fading again. From where you stand, looking out through the postern, the countryside feels vast and unknowable. The road stretches away in a pale ribbon under the moonlight, its edges softened by grass. Beyond it lies the plain, flat for a long while, then rising into the dark humps of distant hills. There is no movement out there, no flicker of torchlight, no rumble of wheels, just stillness, so complete it feels almost fragile. You breathe in slowly, and your breath clouds in the air, curling upward before it dissolves. Behind you, the city sleeps, its rooftops carrying the last smudges of lamplight, its streets narrowing into shadowed lanes. Before you lies the silent open land. The nearest guard glances at you once, his eyes shadowed beneath the hood of his cloak. There is no challenge in his gaze, only a quiet acknowledgement, as if in this hour all who pass are known, and all who walk here share in the same deep calm. You linger for a while at the threshold, feeling the way the gate divides 2 worlds. On one side, the hum and heartbeat of the city, muted now, but alive. On the other, the long reach of the night, untamed and patient. The wind stirs faintly, enough to move the edge of your cloak and carry with it a thread of scent from the fields. Cool grass, turned earth, and something faintly floral that lingers just out of reach. At last, you turn from the postern. The gate's towering shadow folds over you again as you walk back into the city's embrace, each step carrying you deeper into its sleeping streets. Segment 25. The final walk and goodnight. The night is almost still now. The bustling energy of the day, the traders' shouts, the creak of cartwheels, the calls of hawkers, has dissolved into quiet. Only the softest sounds remain, like the faint memory of movement. You step into the narrow street, feeling the cobblestones beneath your sandals. They are cool now, holding only the faintest trace of the sun's warmth from earlier. The stones are worn smooth in places, hollowed slightly in others, where countless feet have passed over them for years, decades, lifetimes. You imagine the footsteps of people who once walked here, merchants, children, soldiers, slaves, each with their own burdens, their own quiet thoughts, their own final walks home. Somewhere nearby, a single torch flickers in its iron bracket. The flame bends lazily in the faintest breeze, its light painting the wall beside it in slow, restless shapes. The shadows lengthen and fold in on themselves, as if the buildings are breathing with the night. Overhead, laundry lines stretch from one upper window to another, the thin fabric hanging motionless in the darkness. A tunic sways just enough to make the faintest whisper against the rope. You pass under it, the shadow sliding over your face like the ghost of the day just gone. The air changes as you walk, one moment carrying the dry scent of sun-baked stone, the next touched with something sweeter. You pass a bakery with its shutters drawn tight, but from inside a memory of warmth lingers. The day's loaves are long sold, but the heat of the oven still curls faintly into the street, carrying the smell of bread, grain, and ash. In a side alley a cat moves, its shape barely visible, only the quiet padding of paws on stone and the faint reflection of its eyes as it pauses to look at you before slipping away into shadow. Farther along, the streets open into a small courtyard. In the centre, a fountain trickles endlessly. By day, children might have splashed here, or women filled clay jugs for their kitchens. But now it is quiet. The water's sound is slow and patient, rippling in the basin, catching fragments of moonlight and scattering them in trembling patterns across the stone. You sit for a moment on the low wall beside it. The stone is cool and slightly damp beneath your hands. Above, the stars are bright, unbothered by the smoke and noise that fill the skies during daylight. The moon rests just beyond the rooftops, silver and whole, washing the courtyard in pale light. You can hear the faint call of a night bird somewhere far away, and the distant creak of a door as someone, unseen, steps out briefly to check the street. When you stand again, the streets seem even quieter. Each footstep you take sounds almost too loud, bouncing gently off the close walls. You notice the carved lintels above doorways, the faint outlines of painted frescoes clinging to plaster walls, their colours faded but still whispering of the care someone once put into them. At last you see the inn where you began the evening. Its lantern burns low now, the flame steady and small. You push the door open, the wood giving a soft groan. Inside, the air is warm again, touched with the scent of wine, herbs, and smoke. The innkeeper gives a nod from his place by the hearth. Not a greeting so much as a quiet acknowledgement, the kind reserved for those returning from a slow journey. Your room is small, the bed simple but inviting. The blanket is thick and folded neatly, holding the faint scent of clean linen and wood smoke. You lie down, feeling the day settle behind you, each sound from outside drifting farther and farther away. The fountain, the footsteps, the rustle of ivy, until they are only threads in a dream. The city sleeps, you sleep, and Rome, vast and ancient, carries on in the dark. So, close your eyes now. Let your breath grow slow, your thoughts soft. Thank you for walking these streets with me tonight. Until we meet again, sleep well, and good night.